kept by the bank. The Wall Street Journal says the pension fund questioned representatives of the bank for 9 months trying to find out what it was doing with the rebates. The bank finally owed up to the problem late last month. The pension fund says the bank kept $47,000 that should have been returned. Wells Fargo says the fees amounted to only $15,000, which it has returned. The Chattanooga Fund says it has decided to fire Wells Fargo as trustee. Ginny Cosola, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. Download the One News Now mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
When I hear the president saying, you just have to respect the flag, well, you kind of don't.
Stacey Washington.
So I respect the symbols of this nation. I would never burn a flag. I do believe that they're not sacred, but they are important to us in our national identity. He could say, I feel like I have to respect it, or I feel like I don't respect people who don't respect it. But to say that you have to is not exactly accurate.
Stacey on the Right. Weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacey on the Right with your host, Stacey Washington.
Rapper Kanye West has proven himself the equal of really anyone on the planet at dominating public discourse with just a few hundred characters on Twitter. 2 weeks ago, he tweeted this, quote, "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob can't make me not love him. We are both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. That's what makes us individuals, and we have the right to independent thought." Well, that was a bomb that went off, and he's been under attack ever since. What does it mean? Take 3 steps back. The Kanye interlude. Can we learn something from it? Jason Whitlock has been watching carefully. He's an anchor at FS1. In a recent op-ed, he called Kanye's statement, quote, "one of the best tweets of all time." He joins us tonight to explain what he means. Jason, what do you mean by that? Why is it one of the best tweets of all time?
Well, I think what Kanye is trying to do is open Black America's mind to the fact that perhaps we've chosen a bad strategy by swallowing all of the Democratic Party and liberalism whole. I say in my column in the Wall Street Journal that in the immediate aftermath of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, Democrats marketed to us liberalism as the solution to all of our problems. And liberalism now is like the cigarette. It's been marketed us the same as the cigarette. Fashionable, sophisticated, it's supposed to be liberating. But I think it needs a Surgeon General's warning, hazardous to your family and all the values you were taught as a child.
Hey, welcome to Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Guess what? He's right. Jason Whitlock on Tucker Carlson on Fox News discussing this new dynamic that we're seeing where someone who has been a standard bearer for mainstream American culture when it comes to rap music and, hip hop and even movies and clothing and fashion and design, a representative and ambassador, if you will, of Hollywood, Kanye West. If you're from the middle of the country or if you're more traditionally minded, if you're a Christian, you're like, yeah, Kanye West. I mean, is he that big of a deal? He's kind of a big deal. 27 million followers on Twitter, correspondingly large amounts on Facebook, and his wife has just been named some kind of iconic ambassador or something or other for a major fashion house. All of these things point to a kind of understanding of who directs policy, who directs our thoughts, who directs what's acceptable in this country. And so that's what Kanye West represents. Then you have Jason Whitlock, who, he was on ESPN. He was a lot of different things. And now he's come out, as he is wont to do occasionally, and he said that, well, you know what? Kanye West is kind of right. But he's not just right. He's got a certain kind of a directness about him, if you will. And that directness comes out in this interview. And so what we're going to do is you're going to hear a little bit more from him, especially talking about this article by Ta-Nehisi Coates where he takes down Kanye West. He goes to all these links and provides all of this documentation that Kanye West is wrong. And the reason that this is so important for us to kind of understand is that there's there is an awakening going on. And I was kind of discounting it last week. Not that I don't want it to happen. I do. But we've heard this before. Blacks are waking up to what the Democrats are really doing. Yeah and no. But this time it's different because we have this person, Kanye West, who's on the left, or at least everyone thought he was. And now he's saying things that are really shaking up the moorings, the foundations on which a lot of the culture that's leftist dominated stands. You can't have one of your ambassadors whose wife is probably arguably the top businesswoman in Hollywood, in that part of the world, in that realm, with her mega marketing of herself. She is the product. And the games that, like, a lot of people think it's just her in that television show and, you know, a little bit of fashion. It's that. But there's also her online presence where she has all these apps and games that you can play where you can pretend to be her and put on makeup. And tens of millions of people play these games. They download them. They pay for the add-ons. It's an amazing thing. They call her a brand influencer, a cultural influencer. So to have her husband saying that no one can stop him from loving Donald Trump, the most vilified person in America today, it's a shift. So in this next piece, Ta-Nehisi Coates is the subject of Jason Whitlock's ire, and he goes in on him appropriately for acting as an overseer for the Democrats. And it's a real insult, but Ta-Nehisi Coates deserves it. It's number 7.
I think us as African Americans, we have to examine, why are we the only ethnic group that has gone in wholly with one political party? No one has to compete for our votes.
Exactly.
We're chained to an ideology that just isn't working over the last 50, 60 years. Liberalism, the swallowing of it whole. Our families have been destroyed. Our children lost and confused. Our black men incarcerated and emasculated, and we've moved away from the traditional values that have always defined us. I think we've made a mistake.
Well, the thing about politics is if you give your vote away for free, you don't get anything in return. And so maybe the hysterical reaction to the Kanye West tweet is the reaction of a party that knows that once people figure that out, like, it's got a major problem on its hands. So you need to tamp down any independent thought immediately, or else it could get out of control.
And it's being tamped down as viciously as anything I've ever seen. You know, when they call in the great writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, basically, I call him the overseer of black thought. He's there to keep everyone in line with the groupthink that the only solution is liberalism for black America's.
And that's the answer. I mean, when you talk to people individually and it's not political, but you say, you know, oh, it's terrible, they're opened up a mega Planned Parenthood in this neighborhood, black people will immediately say, oh, you know, they only exist to make sure you have easy access to contraception and abortion. They think all black people do is have sex. I mean, talk to people. Talk to them, not as Stacey on the right or someone who's political or someone who's with an agenda. Just conversationally, you know, those individuals who are skipping school during the day and getting involved in crime, we need to have a crackdown on that. Yeah, we do. I wonder where the police are. I mean, it's like there's two people. For all of the black Americans that we have in this country, there are two people for each one. One is the common sense regular person that you meet when you work with them or when you eat with them or when whatever. And then the other one is their political self that is completely owned and controlled by the Democrats. And so when Jason Whitlock talks about Ta-Nehisi Coates being the overseer, but who gave the call? It was Stephen Colbert. Remember, I pointed it out last week that Stephen Colbert on his show called out Kanye West, and he did so in terms that basically said, release the hounds. Everybody who's got something, come on, bring it, because he's not behaving as he should. We own that voice. That's our voice. Those 27 million followers are our 27 million followers. That's our property. We liberals own that. We're going to control it. And if it ever steps out of line, we're going to put it down. The same way you would a dog that has rabies back in the day before we had all the different treatments that we have now. And if you think those terms are harsh, you're not paying attention. I haven't said anything even half as harsh as what people are saying about Kanye West and others. Anybody else who they thought you were a Democrat and now you're not, they're going in on you hard. I remember getting pretty upset with Colin Powell when he started flirting around with not being a Republican. But it wasn't because he couldn't be a Democrat. It was because for all these years, he had been reliably on the Republican side. And then just because President Obama had a historic nature to his presidency, all of a sudden he was switching over. And so I questioned that. I wrote a op-ed about it. I talked about it on the radio. And at the time, it just seemed like it was kind of unbelievable because he'd been so staunchly conservative. But there's a difference between questioning the motives behind what someone's doing, calling them out on it, and just insulting them and calling their mental faculties into question. That's what's being done to Kanye West. And this isn't about me being a huge Kanye West fan. I've never listened to every one of his albums. I don't know all of the music that he's made. I don't follow him online social media. But it is about the freedom of expression that all of us have guaranteed to us under the Constitution. And in the public arena, when you see someone take a step out there where they're like, you know what, I see things going on that I don't like. And didn't we call this? I'm not the only one, but I will speak for myself in saying that years ago, into the second term of President Obama's presidency, I said, at some point, Black America is going to wake up and realize we've been had. We were snookered. This guy didn't give us anything. And by give, I'm not talking about reparations or handouts or anything like that. I mean the kinds of policies that radically change the direction of a group of people. The homosexuals got the gay marriage. They also got a lot of other things we never thought we would see in this lifetime. The gays got it from Obama. And other constituencies like illegal immigrants and people who support that whole law-breaking scheme. They got things from the president. And what did the Black community get? Some mentoring programs, which we have those already. Anybody can start a mentoring program. I'm glad he started it, nice. I would never say don't do one. But what about substantial policy that could really, really change lives? The kinds of policies that we have in our blueprint from Project 21. Blueprint.project21.org is where you can see the executive summary. The president wouldn't even take a meeting with National Center or Project 21, President Obama. He wouldn't even allow staffers to meet with someone from our organization. So when it comes to, did he pour, funnel, direct, help move money into the South Side Chicago neighborhood that voted for him almost 100%? No. And when I say funnel, these are all dollars that come from the federal government that most Congress people, senators, they all move the money around. That's why they call it pork. And they put these funds back into the communities that elect them. And so the Democrats owe a whole lot of pork to the Black community for voting for them, over 95% for just decades. But what is there? A continual shift to the left, a continual refusal to acknowledge that the family is the primary foundational unit upon which success is built in this country. A refusal to acknowledge that the Black community is the most churched in America. Still, even after the erosion experienced after the misguided leadership of President Obama. A refusal to simply say, after you've given someone 50 years of your political life as a demographic group, you probably should consider giving now that same largesse to another group, any other group. Black Americans could be voting for Martians and get better results than they're getting voting for the Democrats. And so we come back to what happens when we identify as a race of people instead of God's creation. And we Blacks should know this better than any other group because we're the ones who our history here in this country involves slavery. Not all Blacks, everyone who is Black American is not descended from slaves, but many, many are. And because of that, we know that it was the faith tradition. Abolitionists came out of the faith traditions that brought us where we are today, which is we have equality and freedom. We have liberty. We're recognized in the Constitution as people just as everyone else. And so instead of acknowledging, it took power from on high. It took Almighty God to bring that about for us. And staying within that paradigm, and continuing to see ourselves as we're people. We're now mired down in the most racially negative times I've seen as an adult. And I thought it was bad under President Obama. And so if you look online today, there's a trending story about a young woman at Yale Graduate School. She lives in the Yale dorm. She was in the common area and fell asleep. She has a key to the dorm and she has an ID for the actual university. And so another student, a graduate student who happened to be white, a woman, called the police on her, and the police interrogated her for 15 minutes, even though she used her key to open her dorm room and showed them her identification. And so that's where we are right now. And make no doubt about it, you're at Yale University. More than likely, the girl who fell asleep was a liberal, and so was the woman who called the cops on her. But that's where we are. Instead of dealing with each other, we just call the police. Instead of talking to each other, hey, I don't know if you're okay, or you look like you're asleep, call the police. Because we have swallowed the lie from the Democrats that all we are is either permanent tan or no tan. That's not what God has for us. So we'll discuss this some more, but up next we have Lauren Zelt. She's a Republican strategist, and she's going to come on the show and chat with us today in just a couple of minutes, so stay there.
Preborn is saving babies' lives.
My name is Omaris, and I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I felt that if I brought a child to this planet, that I could not take care of it, and I could not be mentally prepared to handle everything that comes with having a child. So I thought my best option was to have an abortion. And once I came to have my ultrasound and I heard his heartbeat, I could not have an abortion.
The Ministry of Preborn saves babies' lives through ultrasounds. When a mother hears her baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound, she'll choose life 80% of the time. To donate and provide for a free ultrasound to help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I just talked to a friend the other day that I hadn't connected with for 6 months, and I noticed he sounded crisp and clear and full of enthusiasm. So I asked him about it. I said, "What's up?" He said, "Crawford, I just returned from taking some extended time off, and I feel great. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to face the challenges in front of me." Well, I know the feeling. Rest is a wonderful thing. It's a good thing. God reminded the priests of it in Numbers chapter 8, verses 23 through 26. This is what applies to the Levites. Men from 25 years old and upward shall enter to perform service and the work of the tent of meeting. But at the age of 50 years, they shall retire from the work of service and not work any more. They may, however, assist their brothers in the tent of meeting to keep an obligation, but they themselves shall do no work. Remember, the Levites had the responsibility of leading worship and performing sacrifices and the religious ceremonies associated with Israel. It was intense work, and it was very difficult physical work. God says, I don't want them to burn out, so when they turn about 50 years old, tell them to back off. Crank it down a little bit. I want them around for the long haul. There's a limit to what you can do. There are only 3 persons in the Godhead, not 4. We all need to adjust to the seasons of life. We can't do the same things we used to do when we were 18 and 19 years old. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. It's not a sin to rest. In fact, sometimes the greatest act of service to God, yourself, and to those who love you is to take a break.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program.
Mother, you knew him. He must have briefed you when you were a member of Congress. He's a Marine. He's a lifelong Republican. Do you think he can be trusted? Do you think he's a bad guy?
You know, our administration has been fully cooperating with the special counsel.
Do you think his investigation is a hoax?
And will continue to. What I think is that it's been about a year since this investigation began. Our administration has provided over 1 million documents. We've fully cooperated in it. And in the interest of the country, I think it's time to wrap it up. And I would very respectfully encourage the special counsel and his team to bring their work to completion.
Yeah, I agree with him. That's Vice President Mike Pence speaking to one of the reporters over there at NBC. And, you know, it's kind of interesting that they care. Reporters seem to care if other people, like President Trump, possibly had money sent to him, given to him, paid to him, that could have been somehow connected to someone who is a Russian citizen. But no one cares that President Bill Clinton received, after he left office, $500,000 to fly to Russia and do some speaking engagements, or that they gave multiple millions of dollars, the Russians did, to the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton Foundation. So it's like you care on the one hand, but on the other hand, you just can't see it. It's in front of you. It's right there. It's going to bite you in the face, but you can't see it. It's ridiculous. All right, so let's get to our guests. We have Lauren Zelt, Republican strategist and former press secretary for Senator Kelly Ayotte. Hey, Lauren, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Stacey. Thanks for having me. Good to be back with you.
Good to be with you. So I wanted to discuss news of the day. I'm looking at these 3 prisoners coming back from North Korea, and this is a huge achievement. It's a big deal, as Vice President Joe Biden used to say. It's a big deal. What do you see?
The BFD.
Right. So what do you see happening with it going forward? I mean, obviously they're American citizens. They have to be reassimilated back in and possibly have some medical attention and things of that nature. But what do you see happening going forward with North Korea now that they've actually done what they promised, which was give us our people back?
Yeah, you know, I have to tell you, this week has been a really strong week for the Trump administration. Getting the prisoners back from North Korea was a tremendous, I think victory for us as a country. And also, we have his meeting coming up with Kim Jong-un. And I was looking at some polling earlier today, and I think it was a CNN poll. So, take that into consideration. It said 77% of people polled approve of how he is dealing with North Korea. That's astonishing. That number is incredibly high. And, I think people, he really is delivering on a lot of the things that he promised on foreign policy this week. I mean, he took the steps needed to withdraw from the Iran deal, which, you see people on the left, there's some hysteria about this, right? And it's interesting to me because when, it wasn't so long ago that the Iran deal took effect. It was 2015, and even at the time, some Democrats were against it. But, of course, now, because President Trump is the one that is, pulling us out of what was a bad deal, and, because it's him that's doing it. There's hysteria, on the left about that. And I just kind of have to roll my eyes about it a little bit because he's doing a good job on foreign policy this week. I mean, it's great. And I think, I think we're all going to be watching very closely this upcoming meeting, with North Korea. And I think that we're making real progress with that country for the first time in a really long time, and it's really great to see. It's been a very strong week.
So, and I agree. What about the fact that the Democrats are very upset, foreign leaders are very upset by a deal that really wasn't a deal because it wasn't a treaty that went through Congress on our end, and it was never signed by the Iranians. So as late as 2015, it was reported from the State Department of the United States that they hadn't signed the deal. So how can a deal that was never a deal be this big of a deal?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, the kind of arrangement that we had with the Iran deal was just a bad one for us as a nation, especially in terms of our national security. I mean, the Iran deal allowed money to flow into the country. Literally, we know that the Obama administration sent unmarked, I think it was euros or something, to Iran. And we also know that Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. that I still can't wrap my head around how that happened. And, what we've seen, in especially in the business community, this is a big deal in the business community because you've got some companies that had started to engage with the Iranian regime. They are now going to obviously have to reconsider that and change, their business ventures. But the idea, to me as an American, the idea that we were allowing ourselves to do business with a country and literally sending money to a country where people chant death to America and burn our flag, I can't understand how anyone was ever okay with that. I just can't. I think for most normal people, that just doesn't seem like any sort of an agreement that we ever, had any business being in the first place. And at the time when it was signed by President Obama, you saw Chuck Schumer was criticizing it. A lot of Dems were criticizing it. So I just don't, I understand the argument from some on the other side that, it needs to be strengthened. We do need to have some sort of a deal with Iran. And I think that the president probably will do that. I think he will probably negotiate a new arrangement with Iran. I do think that'll probably happen. But at least now it'll be, on our terms. Hopefully things like, the surprise inspections will be included. As it stood, we couldn't, no one from the country could go in and do a surprise inspection of any of their nuclear facilities. And that's, to me, if you get warning that you're coming, right? So say, you tell your kids, hey, I'm going to be home in 30 minutes. Your room had better be clean, right? Like it's the same thing. Like we were warning the Iranians whenever we were going to be, doing any sort of inspections, and it was just totally pointless to me. I don't know, and so I find the outrage on the left to be a little unfounded.
Yeah, there's also other people who are now beginning to notice. Like I noticed President Trump called out Chuck Schumer because he's being hypocritical on the Iran deal. Because, again, this is the kind of stuff that you have to look it up to remember it. Because who's going to remember that Chuck Schumer actually opposed the Iran deal? He voted against it. He went to President Obama and said, this doesn't seem like something we should do. The president was like, we're doing it, and you need to help people get on board. And he was like, I won't. They're like, you go back and, of course, Donald Trump remembers some kind of crazy elephant brain he's sporting there. But it's kind of crazy because he tweeted and said he voted against it. He said he even went against it with President Obama. He fought hard against the bad Iran deal. That's Chuck Schumer. He's in leadership.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing. But, we've seen this, right? The Democrats now are just doing everything that they can to try, to get in the president's way. We're also seeing that, we saw that on during Gina Haspel's confirmation hearing, who, by the way, I believe would be the first woman to lead the CIA, which is really something. That's incredible. And, I think it was even Morning Joe, was calling out senators this morning to, say that they were really just putting on a show for their base as far as Gina Haspel was concerned. That, I think what they were saying was, look, a lot of people know she's very qualified to lead the agency. You're hearing that from the intelligence community as well. I actually work with a 34-year veteran of the CIA, and I asked him about it, and he said there's nobody better. And they know that she is going to do a good job, but they're putting on a show for their base, and it's just, if anything that's good, I think it'll really help Republican turnout in some of these important elections in November, because I think people are going to want to show up and say, no, we like a lot of what President Trump is doing, and we want him to continue to have the chance to do those things.
Well, let's hope that's what pans out. So in other breaking news, we've got this whole Kanye West thing. It's still going on. Jason Whitlock was on Tucker Carlson last night explaining how, you've got Ta-Nehisi Coates writing this really lengthy, heavily linked op-ed excoriating Kanye West for being, uninformed, et cetera, not having the right to think what he thinks, et cetera. And that was after Stephen Colbert and other really prominent liberals have said things about, Kanye West that if a Republican said them, they instantly would have the racist wagon out. And so where do you see that going? I don't see Kanye West changing his mind. Do you think that this will die down, or do you think they're going to continue to kind of pound him until they hope that he'll kind of reverse course?
Well, I don't think anyone really knows what Kanye West is going to do aside from maybe Kim Kardashian. But, I think they probably will continue to criticize him for it. I do think that's really unfortunate. My only concern, honestly, on the whole Kanye West thing is that I always get a little nervous when we, as conservatives and as Republicans, get really excited about someone in the entertainment industry cheering for our cause, because I think then when we then turn around and criticize Hollywood liberals, I think we're a little bit of hypocrites when we do that. So I just always kind of, I think, obviously it's great. It's a lot of attention. It's gaining a lot of attention. And I think it shows really the diversity, of people that, do support the president. But I do worry when people get, I felt the same when Roseanne premiered, I think it was earlier this year. And, everyone was really excited and tweeting about Roseanne. And I get it. It's nice because, really as conservatives and, Republicans, if you are trying to be mindful about the kind of entertainment that you consume, there's really not a lot of mainstream entertainment that you can. It just isn't. So I understand why we get excited when, one of these folks comes out and is on our team. But I do think we should, have a little bit of a grain of salt, a little bit of nuance to it, because, the reality is most of Hollywood and the entertainment industry is very liberal. So, if we want to be able to say that it doesn't matter what, the entertainment industry thinks, then I kind of think we have to do that across the board. But that's just my kind of nuanced take. But that's, I know a lot of people disagree with me about that.
Well, I actually obviously it was great news that she was bringing a show onto the air that had a character who voted for Donald Trump. But if you watch the episodes, it's not really a conservative show. Conservative family values are what she has, but all of her children, all of her whole family, they're all liberals and they're all kind of against what she's doing. And her husband is kind of a silent supporter. He never really says what he believes about Donald Trump or anything. He's just, and I watched the 3 episodes so I could see what is all of the hubbub about. And so if you're someone who watched the episodes before, they had a dysfunctional family, and it was not the example of you weren't watching Roseanne for family tips or marriage tips. You weren't even really watching it to laugh, because some of the episodes, there was not a funny moment in it. It was all just very sarcastic, kind of hard-hitting, and kind of difficult to have anything in common with, really. But there are families that, had a similar type of a situation. But when I watch the 3 episodes and I see what they're kind of talking about in the episodes and what they're putting forward, it's not that I disagree so much with all of it, but, and I, you do burst out laughing occasionally there's a laugh out loud funny moment, but it's not living up to the hype. And I would much rather see, which apparently it's going to happen, we're going to get Tim Allen's show back. And I never watched the original of that. Yeah. Last Man Standing. So I'm interested in seeing that one. I have to say, I do like the fact that on Roseanne's show, her son, who is coming back as a military veteran, he's married to a black woman. And that is very common on active duty to have, interracial marriage and very mixed families. And so I like that aspect of it, and the fact that they brought back a lot of the original characters, one of which is a black couple that they were really good friends with, that they went to high school with during the original program, so the first 9 seasons.
Right.
So it's interesting. I guess I'm just looking for, so what will the cultural impact of this new Roseanne be? Will it paint regular Americans who happen to be Trump voters in a positive light, or will liberals simply dismiss it and not enjoy it, not get anything out of it when they could? Because it's kind of geared towards them. I don't see it as being geared towards conservatives, even though she might feel like it is with some of the themes in it.
Yeah, well, I think that probably it will get ignored. I don't know if you're familiar at all with some of the work done by a scholar at AEI named Charles Murray, but I just finished one of his books, and it was talking about how, the liberal elite really, they've separated themselves from so much of America in terms of what they consume. They're not watching network television. They're not, reading a lot of the same things that the rest of America is reading. And so I think it'll probably get ignored by them. And it's a fascinating read. The book is called Coming Apart. I very much enjoyed it.
I read it too. It's a good book.
Yeah, it is a good book. And so I think when you look at that, you can totally understand and see how sort of the elite, left totally missed Donald Trump coming because they weren't paying attention because they're not, they're really not plugged in with a lot of what's going on in most American families and homes. They're just not. They've completely separated themselves.
Well, and
so I think you're right. I think it probably is targeted at that audience, but I don't know that it's really going to make an impact there.
Yeah, but what you just said kind of points to, so that's what they're trying to do with Kanye West. What they want to do is they want to issue the clarion call that he needs to be vilified, and if he doesn't come back and repudiate what he said, like Chance the Rapper did, then he'll have to be walled off with the rest of us who are, completely. And I think part of the reason why, obviously Charles Murray and in the book Coming Apart, they really do this academic look. But the fact is, when I encounter liberals, if they hear me say something conservative, they become so upset they can't handle it. So it's almost a protectionary measure for them. I've never seen anything like it with adults until now. Like it's crazy. Anyway, thank you so much, Lauren Zelt, Republican strategist. Thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Talk to you again soon. We'll be back with more. We have a little more audio from Jason Whitlock talking about Kanye and black people getting kicked out of the black community just for liking conservative things, which we like anyway. Yeah. So we're back into that discussion when we get back. Call lines will be open at 866-963-2037. Stay there.
This is Uncommon Moments with Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren on their uncommon marriage adventure. Available now in paperback.
Men, we have to take the lead. We have to take the responsibility in making our marriages work. And we got to know that it's biblical. That's not something we hear a lot in business seminars. You're not going to get that in secular marriage counseling classes. And I promise you, if you go to the barbershop and talk about how to get ready for marriage, the fellas aren't going to say, hey, you got to become the servant and be ready to be the slave. But when Jesus, the absolute professional, the best teacher on this subject, when he talks about leadership, he's talking about serving your wife. If you want to be the leader in your house, get ready to be your wife's slave.
The Uncommon Marriage Adventure by Tony and Lauren Dungy. Now available in softcover from Tyndale Momentum. More info at CoachDungy.com.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Romans 13:14 says, "Clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the desires of the flesh." So what are you clothing yourself with? Whether we realize it or not, what we allow in our temples affects our way of living. We can't feed ourselves junk and expect to hear from the Lord. Clothe yourself with the righteousness of God at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Here's what you missed on Airing the Addisons.
So last night, I was singing to Nathaniel. And somebody's probably like, oh man, she was singing this wonderful, beautiful lullaby. Actually, no, I was singing the theme song from Golden Girls. I sure wasn't. I was just making googly eyes. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. And if you threw a party, come on, and invited everyone you knew, you would see the biggest gift would be for me, and the card attached would say,
thank you for being a friend.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay.
Catch Airing the Addisons weekday mornings 6 to 9 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Stacy on the Right. on Urban Family Talk.
If that were the case, our problems would be being solved much faster because 95% of us are afraid to even admit that we have conservative values, and we've moved away from our church upbringing. We've been the most religious people in America for years, hundreds of years, and we're moving more secular. We're moving away from the church. Our religion now is liberalism, and the Democratic Party is our church, and it's just not working for us.
So if Kanye West, who's like not just one of the most popular black Americans, but one of the most popular Americans just across the board, if he doesn't stand a chance of just raising this question, because it's a totally valid question, then who does?
Well, actually, he does stand a chance, because when someone like Kanye speaks out, he creates space for others to speak out. Because anybody that has said, and you got to, Tucker, I'm a non-voter. I don't really like politics much at all.
I can see
but
why.
If you just say, you know what, I think Trump has a good idea here, you get kicked out of the black race. Kanye's saying, I don't agree with everything Trump believes in.
So that is what he said. He said he loves Donald Trump, but he doesn't believe in everything that the president believes in. But he does believe in free thought. So this gives an opportunity for people to start thinking about, well, what does the president believe in? If you read or listen to the 91% of negative coverage, so 91% of the coverage about the president is negative, and if you only listen to that, then you're not going to give anything he has to say a chance. And so you end up having arguments with people, as has happened to me, about whether or not the president is a racist, when that is the least of our worries, because we have laws to protect us against that kind of stuff. But you have to say there are more and more of these incidences of black people being called out and told you can't be here, and the cops get called on them. It's happening more and more often. So do we blame that on President Trump, or do we blame that on ignorant individuals treating people in a way they wouldn't want to be treated themselves? I think it's the second thing. Now, I know a lot of responsibility is being given to President Trump for the state of racial animus in this country, but is he really that powerful? Do you really believe that Donald Trump can, with tweets or with statements that he makes, rile up the entire country and make all of us in our regular everyday interactions, when we're not thinking about Donald Trump? Because I don't know about y'all, but I don't think about Donald Trump when I'm not on the air. It's not like I'm sitting around thinking about him, wondering what he wants me to do. And I don't encounter other people who are literally, I wonder what President Trump would want me to do. Now, I do wonder and pray, what does God want me to do in this situation? Or I sure do need help in this situation. Lord, please help me. I do that when I'm not on here. But I don't, there is no American out there that I'm sitting up pondering and thinking about in all of my other hours, trying to figure out what they would do or would want me to do. Even people that I admire and respect greatly, they don't come into my existence in that way. And if you are finding yourself in that situation, God bless you. I hope you get some help. The president is actually, he's got a job to do that takes more than a regular 8-hour day. And so the idea that he is actively working to subvert the lives of one particular group of Americans, it just doesn't fly. And it doesn't work out with what he can actually do, what he's permitted by law to do, and the work that we're seeing him get done. So I was reading this morning some things about the whole Iran deal, and how the president did have some time where other nations, leaders, leadership, etc., had kind of tried to come up with an addendum to the deal. But in the end, President Trump just couldn't fathom leaving the current deal in place because it had so many flaws. And so therefore, he made the decision in January, months ago, that he would be leaving the accord. And leaving is a tentative description of what he did, since it wasn't binding. It wasn't a treaty that was ratified by Congress. The previous president did not have the ability to enter the nation state of America into a binding resolution with another nation state without the approval of Congress. I mean, we have to wrap our heads around that. First of all, in the actual realm of things you can do as president, you cannot enter the United States of America into a binding treaty on your own. I don't care who you meet with. You can meet with Justin Trudeau. Y'all can kick it up a notch. You can do your dances. You can shoot some Snapchats, but you cannot enter a treaty. Only Congress can do that. So there's that part of it. And then there's just, so if you think about all the things the president is involved in, he's got the immigration issue. He's got obviously the different treaties and things that he has extricated America from. And a lot of them, most of them they involve foreign policy. So you've got the TPP, Transatlantic Partnership. You've got this one here, the Iran deal. You got the whole Paris Climate Accords. And so over the course of the past year, the president has had to deal with those international issues. Domestically, there have been the school shootings and terrorism events, and the overall resistance movement really, that's what's driving the investigation into so-called Russian collusion, which coincidentally, notice no one's ever talking about that anymore. And through all of that, the drumbeat, there's been an incessant drumbeat that the president is a racist, that the president is driving racial animus in this country. And it is true that I felt like President Obama played a negative role in our American interactions between Americans in our everyday lives, because he tended to polarize us and put us into boxes. And then we had to think about each other in the boxes instead of just there's an American and I'm an American. And I do genuinely feel as if the way we look at each other has been permanently altered because of that. And now we have the other side of it, which is President Trump, who has said things that I agree with and said things that I disagree with. But in the end, I don't see him as trying to pull Americans apart. And the reason for that is because I look at his history. President Obama has always had a negative view of white people and a negative view of even his own white family members, the things he wrote about in his books, the things he wrote about his grandmother. And I understand that was those were his early writings. Obviously, he was younger, but he maintained acceptance and that was still his mode of thinking as he was a senator and then as he was the president. For Donald Trump, he spent time in New York opening doors and avenues for Black people. He spent time in Florida opening avenues for Blacks to join country clubs, for Jewish people to join country clubs that were previously closed to them down in Palm Beach. That was Donald Trump. And so over and over again, he has demonstrated a real affinity for people of color. And he was accepted until he came out as a Republican. If you look at the photographs of him with different TV stars, movie stars, rappers, music artists, they all accepted him because in their mind, sure, he gave money to Republicans sometimes, but he was one of them. And so the crime for Donald Trump is not that he's a legitimate racist or that people are legitimately worried about him hauling Black people off in cattle cars or preventing Black Americans from doing anything. It's that they can't tolerate him defecting. He was cool. He was one of them. He went to their parties. They went to his parties. They were down for the cause together. And now he's a Republican. And he beat them. Do you remember during the campaign how often they had him on television? And people were saying, I remember thinking to myself, they're going to come to regret this because they've never given anyone so much free airtime. Anytime he wanted to, he could be on any network. All he had to do was call and they would let him on. And they did that during the primary because they thought, if he's the one, he'll be so easy for our candidate to beat. They knew Bernie Sanders wasn't going to be the one. They knew it was Hillary Clinton. And then here we are. Not only did he win the nomination, win the presidency, now he's still there. They're waking up every morning to the realization that Donald Trump is still president and that all the time they spent with him hobnobbing and having fun at WrestleMania and different television shows. Remember, he even played the nanny's boyfriend once on The Nanny, an episode of The Nanny. I mean, I'm hard pressed to think of a television show that he hasn't had a cameo on. Hollywood loved him. It used to also be du jour to have Donald Trump in your rap music. To mention Donald Trump in a rap song, it was kind of like a game. Can you mention Donald Trump in a rap song on your album? And almost all the rappers did. They would talk about the ties, the stakes. They talk about the wine, or they would talk about him in his Maybach, the car, or the fancy helicopters that he's had. Remember, they had an expose on the helicopters. He has the 2 helicopters, and the inside of them is tricked out nicer than any car any of us regular people own. Just think of the nicest car you've ever been in, and his helicopter makes that look like a piece of garbage. And they did an expose on it and talked about how fancy it was and what it was like to be Donald Trump. And it was always like Lifestyles on the Rich and Famous, but it was the Donald Trump edition. And now they hate him. Every morning they wake up, brush their teeth, and drink their let's bring down Donald Trump Kool-Aid and start the day. And where's that getting us? Again, we go back to the amount of it's like unbridled hatred that is leveled towards him. That means that certain people can't be around you if they know you voted for Donald Trump. I've experienced that here locally in St. Louis. I know 2 individuals who can no longer tolerate me being in the room with them because I voted for Donald Trump. These are adults. One of them, he's got to be at least 20 years older than me. The other one he's maybe 10 or 15 years older than I am. So we're not talking about young people here. And they're professionals. And they have some money. So you would think they would have some kind of tolerance, some kind of, you go through life, you earn, you make all this successful enterprises, you do all of this stuff. You think it would toughen you up just a little bit. But one vote, and they can't be in the same room with you. Not because I want to talk about politics all the time, but because they know that I voted for Donald Trump. Now, let that soak into you for a second and then multiply it out by half of the country. Now, half of the country does not have Trump derangement syndrome. There are plenty of Democrats out there who they know he's the president and they're living and, they're happy with the tax cut. And if he does anything good, they're not going to trumpet it or post it on Facebook, but they'll give him, hey, that ain't bad. I'm glad he did that. But I'd say maybe half of the liberals have Trump derangement syndrome. And it's making them crazy, unable to function. And it's what we're seeing in this. It's now like a movement. It's a mini movement of its own to bring down Kanye West for what he's said, for leaving the group, for defecting from the group. And I kind of echo Lauren Zelt's comments about not being so excited. I wasn't that excited a couple weeks ago when the tweets came out from him. I wasn't that excited. And I'll even go so far as to say I was kind of like, this is going to be a big, huge distraction. And it is in a way, but then again, it isn't. And the reason why it isn't is because it gives us an opportunity to watch yet again as liberals prove themselves to be intolerant, unable to deal, unable to cope with any dissent at all. And it's wrong. So obviously, that Jason Whitlock interview, it was pretty fantastic just because as a black man himself, he's experienced some of the black backlash from his political views being, openly shared. But he made some excellent points there. And so as the Democrats continue to demonstrate that they don't have any respect for Christianity, for morality, for right and wrong, for the freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to keep as much of your money as possible free from taxation, on and on and on and on and on. The question is why would black people continue to give their allegiance and their votes to a party that believes those things when those things are the opposite of what most black people believe? So, hopefully others will be emboldened by Kanye's stance, not because I'm such a huge fan of Kanye's, but because I'm a huge fan of liberty. So we have this fantastic guest next hour. We're going to be speaking to Dr. Jerome Corsi. He's the author of the best-selling book, Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. He's going to be on the show, big-time guest, first time on the program. And we're also going to be listening to some audio of Ted Cruz explaining some they're kind of the minutia, but they're good details about the Iran deal and, going forward. So we'll get into that as well. We have important news and information for you from One News Now coming up next. All right, so keep it here.
The sexual revolution is falsely promised to satisfy the human heart.
God has a better way, if we follow God's prescription.
Dr. Michael Brown offers hope for those trapped in the downward spiral of sexual immorality. The Freedom of Sexual Purity is a powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute. Get your copy today at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Israel and Iran have launched attacks at each other in the most aggressive military confrontation since the 1970s. David Lee Miller reports.
Israel says for the first time Iran, and not a proxy group, launched an attack targeting Israeli territory. Around midnight, Israel says the elite El-Quds force of Iran's Revolutionary Guard fired 20 rockets from across the border in Syria. 4 rockets were intercepted, all others fell short, causing no damage. Israel then retaliated with the biggest show of force in Syria since the end of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Israeli fighter jets destroyed what they describe as a significant amount of Iran's military infrastructure in Syria. A war monitoring group says 23 people were killed, among them 18 foreigners. On the Golan Heights, David Lee Miller, Fox News.
3 Americans landed stateside early this morning in what can only be described as a victory for President Trump's unique brand of foreign policy. Steve Jordahl reports.
It was 0:30 this morning when President Trump was ferried out to Joint Base Andrews to welcome home Kim Dong-chul, Kim Hak-sung, and Tony Kim, none related to each other or the North Korean dictator, after between 1 and 2 years in custody, one at an infamous North Korean labor camp. American Values President Gary Bauer says it's another Trump foreign policy coup.
Once again, we're seeing that Donald Trump's approach being very tough with countries like North Korea and making it absolutely clear that times have changed and that America is not going to be pushed around. And I think we're seeing now in a variety of ways foreign governments and foreign leaders not wanting to push their luck.
Most Trump supporters thought businessman Donald Trump had a fair shot at doing great things with the economy, and he has. The big question mark was his international diplomacy chops. No one knew what to expect. And, of course, his opponents have nothing good to say about any aspect of his presidency.
From the very beginning of the Trump administration, there has been no shortage of critics, both in the media and on the left, as well as some even on the never-Trumper right, suggesting that he doesn't know what he's doing, that he doesn't understand foreign policy, that he's violating diplomatic norms, blah, 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 blah.
He says it's nice to have some foreign policy victories. I'm Steve Jordahl.
A new report highlights abuse of work requirement waivers for food stamps. Chris Woodward has more.
The report is called Waivers Gone Wild and comes from the Foundation for Government Accountability, where Christina Rasmussen is Vice President of Federal Affairs.
It turns out that state governments are abusing loopholes within the food stamp program so that able-bodied adults who are supposed to work, train, or volunteer in exchange for their food stamp benefits are being completely waived from that requirement. And it's really a shame considering that this is an important part of maintaining integrity of the food stamp program, and it's being completely undermined by state governments.
The work requirements in food stamps date back to 1996, when Congress and President Bill Clinton passed bipartisan welfare reform.
They've been in place for more than 2 decades now, But states have figured out how to abuse loopholes within the system so that they don't ask able-bodied adults to work, train, or volunteer in exchange for their food stamp benefits.
The House Oversight Committee held a hearing about this on Wednesday, and President Trump has called for rules to be strengthened in the new farm bill that's in development.
There are many state governments across the country who have properly and appropriately implemented the work requirements that are in the food stamp program for able-bodied adults. However, there are a number of states like California and Illinois where the governors and the state legislatures basically ask the federal government for permission to waive the work requirements, and they're doing so in economic boom times.
I'm Chris Woodward.
The key long-term U.S. mortgage rate held steady this week, providing a lure for potential home buyers as the spring buying season goes forward. Mortgage buyer Freddie Mac says the average rate on the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage was 4.55%, unchanged from last week. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Nothing can get done in the United States Senate for good unless we end the legislative filibuster. We are urging you today to call your senator and ask them to end the legislative filibuster so that we can defund Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in America. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121, or go to afaaction.net.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
John Bolton, how many presidents have you worked for, including this one?
Well, this is the fourth one, and I'm proud to be part of it. We've got a lot to do.
You've served 4 presidents. You and I served 1 together, Reagan. This is one of these historic decisions, isn't it?
It is. I think it's one of the most consequential decisions of the Trump administration so far, at least. And it reverses one of the 2 most important things that Obama did, both colossal mistakes, this deal with Iran and Obamacare. I wish we could reverse Obamacare as decisively as the president acted today.
Yeah, me too. I wish that as well. Welcome back to the program, everybody. I want to give you a St. Louis heads up. I am actually going to be one of the moderators on a panel tomorrow for our Senate primary here in the state of Missouri. We have so far confirmed 5 of the primary people, or primary candidates, I should say. Josh Hawley has not yet confirmed that he will be attending this event. I hope that Josh Hawley will. I actually get all of his press releases from his press secretary, and so I'm hoping that he's going to make the effort to come out. It's out in Far West County, so not difficult for him to reach the location. And so Jamie Allman is going to be the MC, and then it'll be Ed Martin and myself both moderating the questions and asking them of the candidates. And it's going to be pretty exciting. It's my second time doing something like this. I love getting to do it. You get to not only meet the candidates, but you get to see the reactions to what they say from a live audience, which is it's fascinating. It's much more interesting than watching these types of things on TV, although those can be really fun. In fact, with election campaign season coming up, I'm encouraging you, if you want to kind of have a fun night, and I know these sometimes happen on weeknights, but what are you going to do? We used to have debate watching parties, and we still, with the season coming up, I'm thinking of a couple of my friends who normally host these who'll probably be sending out some text messages saying, hey, primary, season for this or that, and let's go watch this debate. And we'll meet up at their house, and sometimes it's just, whatever people like to drink and some little bowls of cashews and things like that. Other times people have full-blown hors d'oeuvres, but it's a great time to interface. And then afterwards, you can discuss what you heard from the candidates and kind of help flesh out your opinions on the candidates in the primary season. And then in the general, when the debates happen, hopefully there will be debates between the Democrats and Republicans in these hotly contested Senate races and other races at the local level. It's a chance yet again to get together all around one person's television screen and watch them and kind of figure out what exactly did we just see there. So it can be fun. So I'll be moderating that tomorrow night. and it'll be out here locally in Fenton. I think it's at Rockwood High School. Probably should double check that if I'm going to be there. And for today's program, welcome back to Hour 2, urbanfamilytalk.com. American Family Radio is at afr.net. And you were just listening to John Bolton, and he was talking about his wish is that we could reverse Obamacare as decisively as the Iran deal. But that's the lesson here, isn't it? Obamacare was pushed through in the dead of night. Nobody read it, and it was nothing but the Democrats who voted for it. But it was sound. The Republicans let it go through. They never contested it. They never sued about it afterwards. It is law because it went through Congress. The Iran deal is not. And there's a reason for that. One of them was done by duly elected representatives under the process and procedures that are approved and codified into law. And the other one was done with a pen and the phone. And that's why it's being undone so easily. And it's the same thing with TPP and the Paris Climate Accords. All of those things were done with a pen and the phone. And that's why they're so easy to erase, which is why it's so important that you have a plug-in to your legislators. And obviously, we have to be praying for these people. That we have to be praying for them, that they'd be wise and that they would be courageous and that they would do what's right. We also have to be plugged into them to hold them accountable so that if they don't do those things, that we can say, you know, we're just not sending you back this time. Happens. Doesn't happen a lot, but it could happen. So I already talked to you about President Trump calling out Chuck Schumer over his hypocrisy on the Iran deal, how vociferously he opposed it, even straight up to President Obama, and went against his party and voted against it. You know, he was very clear he didn't like it. So I don't know why he loves it now. But now I want to pivot over to some local St. Louis news. And this is important because this could be any neighborhood. This could be any community, any street of houses. This happened. So you've got this elderly man. He's 74 years old. He was in his backyard on Sunday. And Frederick Smith, 26 years old, came into his backyard and forced him into his North St. Louis residence at gunpoint and demanded property. They don't say what, but he was robbing him. Now, his wife was at home. So once they got inside, the homeowner went and grabbed his own gun and shot at the robber, Frederick Smith. They exchanged gunfire, and the 74-year-old man was shot in the neck, and Frederick Smith was shot in the side. So they dialed 911. The ambulance came and found both. The police, when they arrived on the scene, they found both firearms in the house. Both of the men were shot. They were both taken in for treatment. Now, when Frederick Smith, the 26-year-old assailant, was taken to the hospital, he was listed in critical unstable condition and later was pronounced dead in the hospital. The homeowner was shot in the neck but was treated and released from a hospital, and he was home by Sunday evening. Now, the wife, who was in the house during the time of the shooting, was not injured. And that should be where the story ends, right? You've got the homeowner. He defended himself. It's very, very sad that the assailant was killed. But, you know, he forced him into the house. What did he think the old guy was going to do? Well, then hours later, in the wee hours of Monday morning, they're back at home and they hear gunshots. Someone was driving by their home and fired a bunch of bullets into it. And the bullets shattered glass, pierced a wall, pierced the front door, but no one was hurt. It was hours afterwards. So they're thinking it was a drive-by retaliatory shooting for the homeowner killing the assailant originally early in the afternoon. So, you know, case number 8,767 of it's better to have a firearm in the home and to be trained in how to use it so you can defend yourself, because there's no telling what would have happened if he hadn't had that during an armed robbery at his house. So it's a sad story, but it's a cautionary tale. Know how to defend yourself. Now I want to pivot over to Gina Haspel, who has been testifying in her Senate confirmation hearings for her opportunity to become the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. And she mention the fact that she's a woman and she's the first nominated ever to lead the CIA. And she was the first woman to hold the deputy position as well It's number 5.
There were few senior women leading at CIA in those days, and we are stronger now as an organization because that picture is changing. I did my part quietly and through hard work to break down some of those barriers. And I was proud to be the first woman to serve as the number 2 in the clandestine service. It is not my way to trumpet the fact that I am a woman up for the top job at CIA, but I would be remiss in not remarking on it, not least because of the outpouring of support from young women at CIA and indeed across the IC, because they consider it a good sign for their own prospects.
So she does say in that audio clip that it's not her normal way to point to gender, but she wants to share how impactful her even being considered for it has been for other women in the CIA who want to achieve, higher levels of success there. And I'm definitely not in favor of the feminist movement that says that, one example of this is that there over 90% of all workplace injuries that happen to men. But we don't have any marches or anything like that going on. And it's because men tend to work in high risk jobs more often than women. They're present in those job areas, almost exclusively in comparison to women. And so that's why the injuries, when they occur to men, because they're the ones who are there working those jobs. But we don't have big marches or anything of that nature going on about workplace injuries for men or about increasing safety at workplaces. So the most recent statistic out that shows the dominance of women in our culture is that there are now more women in medical school than there are men. And some people will say that women have a much more empathetic nature and will be much better at, running the field of medicine than men have been. That women are emotionally plugged into people and can sense more things about people than men can. My counter to that is, I obviously believe women are more emotionally centered than men are. Men are much more logically minded. Generally speaking, obviously, those stereotypes are rooted in fact. And statistically, they're demonstrably true. But it's not so much that I care whether or not more women or men are in medical school. It's that there's a corresponding decrease in the number of men who are seeking to go to medical school means there are fewer men who are qualified to do it, which means their educational outcomes have been limited, which means that there's a problem for America's men. And so I'm all about hey, I hope women can go and achieve whatever they'd like to achieve and do whatever they'd like, except for women in combat. I don't agree with that. But what's happening to our men? What's happening to them? And if you're a woman and you think, well, I just don't care about this, I want to see women succeed. But do you plan on marrying a man? Or if you do, if you have a son, do you care what happens to him? This continuing, it's like little schisms. It's like someone's taking a knife and cutting the bonds that we have with each other, and they're slicing them open. And no one seems to be willing to run up and say, we need a Band-Aid for that, because that's just been two people were connected, and now we've sliced them. And everywhere you look in our culture, that's what's happening. Not just between men and women, blacks and whites, Hispanics and whites, blacks and Hispanics. All of these made-up constructs like race. People are slicing and dicing in between those. And then they're slicing and dicing between men and women and boys and girls and, young people and old people, millennials and Generation X and all of that. Just slice, 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 slice. Cut, 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 cut. No Band-Aids, no medical care. Just cut, 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 cut. And everybody's left bleeding. And we're not better for it. It looks like something to cheer over. Yay, more women are in medical school. It looks like something to cheer over, but you have to dig down into those results to see, oh, I see. So you do have a slight uptick in the number of women who are applying, but what you really have is a marked decrease in the number of men who are applying and getting into medical school. How can we cheer that? That's not what we want. We don't want fewer people who are qualified. We want more. So there's that. And then I was reading some interesting things over at the Conservative Treehouse this morning about their analysis has been so spot on what the president has been doing behind the scenes when it pertains to these huge geopolitical, international type deals. And they were talking about how he's been really, and we've watched it. I'm on the White House press list, so I see the pictures, but there have been so many times now, more than 2 visits by Shinzo Abe from Japan, and then, of course, Xi Jinping from China. They've come over and they've been, really wooed and treated to much fanfare here in the U.S. by President Trump down at Mar-a-Lago. And they've also spent time, their wives, and there was even the little, I know you guys, I talked about it on the show, the video of Ivanka Trump's daughter, Arabella, doing a couple of traditional Chinese poems, children's poems, in Mandarin. And she sang them in Mandarin for the benefit of the Chinese leadership and his wife and the other people in their party. And so it's been a real kind of relationship building exercise. And according to Conservative Treehouse, they're saying that there's the face of China, which is like the panda, they liken it to the panda. And then there's the red dragon that's behind it. And they don't make decisions that don't benefit the red dragon. So while they present a silent panda face, behind the scenes, they're always making moves to benefit their country. And so there has to be a way to deal with them that's different than the way that we deal with other countries that have a more magnanimous approach as we have. And that's what the president's been doing. And the proof of that is this new deal between North Korea and South Korea and the United States, which involves also Russia, China, Japan, etc. And so it was fascinating reading. I'll get into a little bit more of it, but we have Dr. Jerome Corsi up next. He's an author, and he's going to come on and talk about his book, Killing the Deep State. So that's right after these messages.
Facebook now allows for 58 gender identifications.
Here's what you missed on Airing the Addisons.
When Target says that however you identify, that's the bathroom, the changing facility you get to use. Now, it's amazing though, because they still only have 2. You understand? They only have a male bathroom and a female bathroom. But the ideology that they have espoused says that there's like 50 or 60, depending on what you read. You understand? So if they're really like looking out for the entire transgender community, if they're really looking out for, the new wave of the way people choose to identify, then they'd have a lot more stalls than that. But the reality is that they know that this stuff is foolishness.
Right. Tune in weekday mornings, 6 to 9 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This stuff is foolishness, y'all.
Hello, I'm Pastor Joseph Parker, and this is Daily Time in the Word. It's our goal to help you better understand the great blessing of spending time in God's Word every single day. In the Word of God, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, beginning at verse 14, it tells us these words, "But you must continue in the things which you have learned and been assured of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you've known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work." In God's Word, Psalm 119, verse 105 tells us, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." If you're not reading the Word of God every day, today is a good day to start this very, very important habit. If you don't take the time to get into God's Word daily, you don't know what you're missing. It's so important for us to understand that we're designed to fill our lives with the precious and powerful Word of God. I want to challenge you to start the important habit of reading God's Word daily, and specifically, I want to challenge you to start reading at least 3 chapters in your Bible each and every day. 3 chapters is a good basic spiritual meal, and you can do 3 chapters in about 12 to 15 minutes, but it'll bless your day and it'll bless your life. God's Word brings healing and wholeness to our lives. So I want to challenge you, if you're not reading God's Word daily, start that habit today and it'll bless you tremendously. Lord, thank you for the wonderful gift of your Word. Anoint every listener with a fresh and mighty anointing that will encourage them to get into your Word absolutely every day. and allow their life to be blessed, empowered, enriched, and lifted up as they spend time in your word day by day. Thank you for the wonderful gift of your word, and empower us to be in it each and every day. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing the program on Periscope and YouTube and all of the good places that we have the show up, live streaming. Thanks to our terrestrial radio listeners all over the country. Thank you so much. And also for those who've been reaching out, and I've been emailing out links to the blueprint and kind of communicating back and forth. And I wanted to let you guys know, if you've ordered mugs, all mug orders have been fulfilled. Check your mailboxes here in a couple of days. Depending on how far away from you live, you should have them this week or next week, everyone who ordered a mug. So, and that's on the merchandise page over at stacyontheright.com. You can also subscribe to the newsletter. I'm looking to get the numbers up over there because every week I notice that I'm being throttled down more and more for certain things that I post on Facebook and Twitter. And so it's not that I'm going to leave those platforms, but you have to have somewhere that's your home just in case, because Facebook has recently shut down advertising on campaigns to stop people in Ireland from voting to legalize abortion there. It's actually illegal to have an abortion in Ireland. And there's a campaign to make abortion legal in that little tiny island country, and they don't want it. And so they had a lot of people organizing and motivating online on Facebook. And so they basically shut down all advertising for it because Facebook they have an ideology. They have a point of view. And so they're not a neutral platform, and they don't act like one. And so, don't forget that when you're at stacyontheright.com, just put your little email in there. I never share them. I never sell them. I only use them to email you once a week. All right. Thanks so much for that. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Jerome Corsi. He's the author of the best-selling book, Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. Dr. Corsi, thank you so much for coming on today.
Great to be with you, Stacy. Thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you. I often will see you on TV talking about different things. And when I got the email today, I was like, wait, I can have him on my show. Yes, yes, yes. So excited.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
So why did you write this book? That's the first thing, because people always ask me when I read the book, why did they write it, or what did you get out of it? Why did you write it?
Well, I wrote Killing the Deep State because I wanted to expose this coup d'etat within the government. It's shocking when you read the book, but you'll see that a coup d'etat plan, treasonous, I argue, started in the FBI to make sure Donald Trump could be removed from office. And it focused around creating this using this fraudulent dossier, the Fusion GPS dossier it had been created by this intelligence agent in Great Britain, Christopher Steele, to say that Donald Trump was working with the Russians, colluding with Russia to steal the election from Hillary. And even James Comey, when he testified to Congress under oath, said that the dossier was so full of lies that the FBI could not authenticate it. Its claims were not in any way proven to be true. But yet Comey used that document in part 3 times, signed applications to get FISA court warrant approval to do electronic surveillance on Donald Trump's campaign, using that same document to say that there was collusion within the Trump campaign in Russia. So, this to me was a complete fabrication, and the coup d'etat planners were so determined that they hated Trump and his America First message that they began committing crimes, even treason, to try to prevent him from being president.
So, okay. I kind of sometimes, Dr. Corsi, it's like you snap to for a minute, like you're doing whatever you're doing, whether you're, cooking or cleaning or whatever, and you snap to for a second, and I just sometimes will think to myself, so it was like a fake campaign thing. You know what I mean? Like I just try to set it up in my head again that this is happening and no one's been arrested, or that it's happening and our government is still moving forward with an investigation on President Trump that's based on a campaign like the dirty books that are regularly made for campaigns. It's not illegal to make them, anything like that, but to use it to conduct a prosecution on a person who is running for the presidency and then actually wins and then is the president, I just still can't really believe it's happening. How is it that this is still going on?
Well, the good question, that's a good question, but the deep state is not going to give up easily. So, as I write Killing the Deep State, the first phase of this battle is that Donald Trump has got to survive the effort of the special counselor, Robert Mueller, to get him impeached over Russian collusion. Now, Russian collusion is not even a crime. And it looks like Robert Mueller is going to fail, and that his prosecution of 13 Russians who posted some things on social media, the judge in that case is calling into question whether there's any proof it affected a single vote, or that there's any collusion with Donald Trump's campaign. And if there's neither one, and I don't think the judge is going to find that, I don't think Mueller's going to be able to say either one's going to be an argument in the case, then the case is outside his mandate, I believe, which was to examine Russian collusion. So we have 13 Russians posting on social media. I mean, there might have been 13 Australians, or there might have been 13 New Zealanders, or how many other people from around the world are posting on social media every day that we don't know where they're from. And it's not a crime, I don't think, to post on Twitter, unless, you don't have to be American to post on Twitter. And, you don't have to be American to post on subjects about American elections. Not a crime for a foreigner to post. So I think what we've got here is we've got, in this phase one, especially with the mainstream media, this effort to demonize Donald Trump by saying he, stole the election, convincing Russia to steal these elections, the emails from the Democratic National Party and from Podesta, then give them to WikiLeaks. And again, there's no evidence of that. Julian Assange says that's not where he got the emails. It wasn't from Russia. I suggested strongly it's come from this Seth Rich, who was inside Hillary's campaign as an internet technology worker, and got upset because he found out that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, then the head of the Democratic National Party, and Hillary were conspiring to block Bernie Sanders, who may have legitimately been on track to win the primaries. He stole the emails, I think, with a thumb drive and got them to WikiLeaks. But, again, all of this is because of the hate Trump. And so I think that once the Mueller is fired, I think the firing of Mueller, I believe, is actually imminent. I think it's right in the process right now. I think more than one of these court cases are going to be thrown out, and the judges from the bench going to say that Mueller engaged in prosecutorial misconduct, which Mueller and his team have a history of having done. There's even a book written on it called License to Lie about the U.S. Attorney's Office, under these, Mueller, a guy named Weissman who's on the team with Mueller, a whole series of crooked federal prosecutors who will lie, cheat, even commit crimes to get you convicted so they can put another scalp on their belt.
Wow. So I just wrote that title down because that sounds like something good to read.
Yeah, the book is by Sidney Powell. I have it right here. She's I've spoken to her, I've interviewed her and written about her. She's a very brilliant former U.S. attorney. Got a great legal mind. Occasionally you see her on Fox News commenting on legal materials. But her book, License to Lie, which is on the Enron and Senator Ted Stevens case in Alaska, and she makes it very clear that Mueller and these others who were still involved, special prosecutor, are dirty prosecutors who had case after case. They prosecuted people who were innocent, stayed in jail for years. They've had their cases and convictions thrown out of court by judges who felt that they leaked to the press or committed other crimes in trying to convict somebody. It's a very frightening read, but it's what's going on again.
Okay, so I want to get back to your book, Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. So I understand that it's a fight. I think we're all kind of cognizant of the fact that this is literally being played out daily, with the 91% of the news coverage being negative, from the left-owned media to the right media, such as myself and yourself. We're running around doing all that we can, but we're having our social media metrics tamped out by Facebook. And so we're engaged in a battle. And I think one of the most pivotal moments was you described that you've got this judge who's reviewing some, casework with Mueller, and he calls everybody out and says, this is beyond the scope of what the investigation is supposed to be. So you talked about there possibly being, an imminent firing of Mueller. And that has been, in my opinion, something that the left has been trying to bait the president into doing, because they think it will mean that he's guilty of obstruction. How does the firing of Mueller actually happen without being double jeopardy, kind of like what happened with him firing the FBI director and how that kind of blew up and has been bad?
Well, you see, if you've got a judge that rules in one of these cases Mueller has brought, and there's 3 cases in which the judges have all objected so far to Mueller and his prosecution. All 3 of them from the bench have lectured Mueller and have demanded that Mueller come back with answers. Okay, that's in the Russia troll case, in the case of Paul Manafort. Judge Ellis pointed out that these offenses that Paul Manafort were being charged for were 2005, 2006, 10 years before he was campaign manager for Donald Trump. Nothing to do with Russian collusion. And the 3rd case is General Flynn. And now the House Intelligence Report has come out and shown that General Flynn did not lie. But and the judge demanded that Mueller turn over what they call the Brady material. It means anything you've got as prosecutor that might show the innocence of the defendant. And the truth is that Mueller never told the defense, of Mueller's defense, that Peter Strzok, this one of these, the 2 lovers in the FBI who were exchanging these hateful messages to Trump, interviewed Flynn, and they changed the interview to make it look like Flynn lied. Now, if any one of those cases comes out and the judge says, Mr. Mueller, I'm throwing this case out because you as prosecutor engaged in prosecutorial misconduct, and I'd like it examined to see if any of it is criminal. Now, if the nation knows that, firing Mueller by Donald Trump, I think, becomes justified.
Okay, so that's this is why you have to come on to explain this stuff, because I had not put those 2 together. I did read, there was a big news story about the comments that were made, but so I understand that part. So let's go a little further. So if he has just cause to fire Mueller because he stepped outside of the bounds of his prosecutorial abilities, at that point, does that completely shut down the investigation, or do you still need more reports to come out of congressional committees or senatorial committees? What happens next?
I think what happens next is that the entire thing shuts down, because Mueller's entire team will have been involved in the prosecutorial misconduct. It wasn't just Mueller. The whole group of lawyers together, all of them together, that were engaged in this kind of a witch hunt, as Donald Trump says. And this is, I think, going to be the end of the entire special prosecutor, because Mueller might himself be put under investigation. What has happened to Mueller is Mueller was involved himself in the Uranium One scandal. Mueller took a secret mission in 2009 to Russia with uranium samples for Hillary. It's never been explained. Now, when it came around time that's when the Uranium One sale to Russia was just getting started. That was the kind of like the germinal year of it. By the time Hillary was ready to sell, they wanted Uranium One to be sold to Russia, and the Clinton Foundation was behind this. Bill Clinton was very involved in the Uranium One deal. Mueller suppressed from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, this government committee that had to make a ruling as to whether the sale was in national security interest or not. And Mueller had been investigating, knew there was a Russian bribery scheme in the uranium industry ongoing in the United States. There had been one indictment on it. Mueller suppressed that information. He didn't let the committee voting know that. And the whistleblower in that case has come forward with evidence that Mueller did suppress the case. Well, he was trying to beg it be investigated more thoroughly. And Hillary got $147 million out of that deal. Now, Mueller's worth $18 million. You don't get that by being a Department of Justice pension. So what the others have done is they've gotten a series of cushy law jobs for Mueller, and he goes back in and does some FBI, another tour in the FBI, comes out and has another tour with a cushy law firm. He was making $3.5 million with the law firm that just before he became special prosecutor. And I wonder if that job was in any way a payoff for suppressing the information. Hillary's foundation made $147 million. I think this is the heart of this needs to be criminally investigated.
Well, it can't happen without the kind of research and authorship that you're providing to the American people. I encourage people to head out and get Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. I'll put the link up on my Twitter feed to the Amazon site where you can one-click order it. That's how I get all my books. Dr. Jerome Corsi, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My great pleasure, Stacey. Thank you.
All right, talk to you again soon. Dr. Jerome Corsi, his book is Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. And as you heard, he's got all the dish. He knows exactly how this thing could crack out. And I'm kind of hoping he's right. It'd be great to have this behind us. When we get back, we'll have the last segment of the show here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Stay there.
This is Uncommon Moments with Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren on their uncommon marriage adventure. Available now in paperback.
Men, we have to take the lead. We have to take the responsibility in making our marriages work. And we got to know that it's biblical. That's not something we hear a lot in business seminars. You're not going to get that in secular marriage counseling classes. And I promise you, if you go to the barbershop and talk about how to get ready for marriage, the fellas aren't going to say, hey, you got to become the servant and be ready to be the slave. But when Jesus, the absolute professional, the best teacher on this subject, when he talks about leadership, he's talking about serving your wife. If you want to be the leader in your house, get ready to be your wife's slave.
The Uncommon Marriage Adventure by Tony and Lauren Dungy. Now available in softcover from Tyndale Momentum. More info at CoachDungy.com.
Listen to Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacey on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Hi, I'm Larry Nix with Defining Moments. Join me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk. We talk to people of all ages, stages, phases, and places. From all walks of life, background, and cultures about serious matters, life-altering encounters, second chances, and even how to face life moving forward. Sometimes you hear us get emotional, sometimes you hear us laugh. But more importantly, you'll hear the truth that will set you free. All on Defining Moments every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk.
More than 1 million believers have signed the pledge to boycott Target, and we urge you to join them. The American Family Association opposes the policy of Target allowing transgenders into the bathroom of their choice. Here's AFA President Tim Wildman.
There's a reason why we've had male and female separation in restrooms and fitting rooms for all of mankind's history.
A policy which allows men into women's restrooms and fitting rooms is not right, nor is it safe.
I think the human resources departments of these major corporations are the tail wagging the dog, because I just can't see corporate executives at Target or anywhere else sitting around a table going, you know, guys, I think we need to open up our women's restrooms for men.
Visit afa.net to learn more and sign the pledge to boycott Target. Don't spend your money at Target until they stop putting our family members at risk with this dangerous, politically correct policy. That's afa.net.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the show.
You know, it's interesting, Senator. I was clicking around yesterday with the big news that they were coming back to the United States. And a majority of the news coverage on the other channels was about Stormy Daniels. What the heck's up with that?
Most of the media, they're just out of their mind. They have what I call Trump derangement syndrome, where all they can do is attack the president all day long on the scandal of the day. I got to tell you, I think most Texans are really tired of it. When I go home, nobody asks about the latest scandal of the day and whatever the talking heads are lighting their hair on fire about. People are excited about tax cuts, about regulations being lifted, about jobs growing.
Yeah. He's right. That's Senator Ted Cruz. And he's talking about TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. And I just, honestly, with seriously partisan people, you do hear, oh, you know, the president's a racist, yada, yada, yada. Everybody else is like, well, you know, I'm going to wait and see what happens with North Korea. I mean, I think it's one of those really exciting moments for Americans to see something happen with North Korea. And, you know, if you've been paying attention to the news, you understand that this is momentous. This is fantastic. And especially for those three guys who were in that hard labor camp to be back in America. I don't know if they'll ever be the same, probably never be the same, but at least they're back in America where they can have some semblance of freedom. And I don't know how it works with if you've been, you know, detained in a foreign country, if our government provides you with some assistance or what have you, but their families have to be overjoyed. And, you know, it's 2 a.m. I don't know if you guys caught the video. And it's President Donald Trump and Melania Trump, 2 a.m. They're at Joint Base Andrews meeting these guys, walking with them, talking to the reporters who were on hand. I mean, that's kind of amazing. It's wonderful. It's to see people return to their home. We have other people who are American citizens who are being detained in other foreign lands, and I'd love to see them come home as well. This is, you know, a precursor to that, in my opinion. Other nations will see, okay, you know what, maybe if we give these people back, we can get some concessions as well. But that's usually what it's about. They want something. That's why they kidnap Americans. They want something from us. President Trump can make that happen. So back to Senator Cruz. He then goes on to talk about how, you know, it's not just Chuck Schumer. It was a lot of these Democrats in elected office when this deal was being put together and they figured out what was going on and they were told by President Obama, hey, you know, I'm putting together this Iran deal and we want your buy-in. And they said, I don't really like it that much. And they were Democrats. It's number 4.
The Iran deal that President Obama negotiated was catastrophic. It did enormous damage to America because it allowed billions of dollars to go directly to the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. And even worse than that, it did so in a way that ensured Iran would get nuclear weapons. You know, when the Ayatollah Khamenei pledges death to America and death to Israel, I believe him. He is a religious radical zealot, and canceling the deal is exactly the right thing. What we need to do and what we're going forward doing is reimposing crushing sanctions, urging our allies to do the same, and making sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon.
But, Senator, you know how they feel. They've made it clear they came and lobbied the foreign minister of England, and we know Macron spent 2 days here and Merkel spent a day, all to keep us in. In fact, she released this statement. It is no longer such that the United States simply protects us, but Europe must take its destiny in its own hands. That's the task of the future. Your reaction?
Oh, listen, we're going to see some posturing in European capitals, and the reason is there's some big European companies that want to do business with Iran. They make money, and that's got a lot of the European countries defending this deal. I'll tell you, when the deal was being negotiated, I had European ambassadors in my office asking for my help, saying the Obama administration is pressuring us. We think this is a foolish deal. Will you help us press back? So, look, no one should be surprised that their companies are interested in money. But you know what? We've got a bigger responsibility. The Ayatollah with a nuclear weapon, if he ever acquires a nuclear weapon, I think the odds are unacceptably high. He would detonate that weapon in the skies of Tel Aviv or New York or Los Angeles.
If Germany
we can't roll the dice.
Okay. So he went through a lot there. The one I want to focus on is the comment by Angela Merkel of Germany, the Chancellor of Germany, talking about how we can no longer rely on the United States to protect us. So we discussed here on the program the dynamic between a lot of Western European nations and the United States after the conclusion of World War II. When we entered the Cold War, America still had a ton of bases in a ton of those nations. And those bases provided the kind of umbrella that was required to deter Russia and other nations from, cranking back up and trying to take territory, trying to, realign nations into and underneath their own power. It also provided through the American taxpayer, because we would build the base, we would put troops on the base, and then we would allow American families to live on the bases with the troops who were deployed there, men and women. You could bring your family. So there were schools and there were hospitals and there were everything you can find in a regular American town would be there in Germany, for example. And I've seen these bases all over the world because I've traveled all over. And this was during my time growing up on one of these bases, on many of these bases, because my father was stationed on more than one of these bases during my childhood. And so the economies were radically impacted for the good by the presence of American soldiers. And when there would be dust-ups with terrorism, there'd be little eruptions, nightclubs would be bombed, et cetera, in Germany. It was also the U.S. military who would assist the German government in whatever they needed. When German authorities needed something, they could always rely on the United States. The soldiers and airmen, et cetera, stationed near the place where these things would happen to stabilize the situation. And so, of course, you'd have drunk troops, you'd have troops who, commit crimes and things like that. But for the most part, our being there was an economic boost because Americans stationed in Germany spent a lot of money, most of their disposable income. It wasn't like nowadays where you can just click a button and have something at your house in 2 days. And Amazon didn't exist back then. And ordering from the United States from the Sears catalog, it took a while. But it was really easy to just get in your car and go out on the weekend into the economy, as we called it, the German economy, and shop off base and buy German goods and services and use those German toys for your kids, German clothes for your kids, whatever. And it was the same in France and Italy and you name it. Everywhere we had a base, the American troops provided an economic boost. So it was a protection of two things. First, an infusion of cash, American dollars, into their economies. And Americans, you know how we are. You can live on base, or you can take your base, your BA, it's your money that the federal government, the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, whatever, they give you a certain amount of money for your living expenses. And it's meant to pay your rent in an apartment if you can't live on base. And a lot of troops would live off base because it worked. The numbers worked out and they could get a house off base and live in, all their neighbors are Germans and they're driving a car with American tags, but they're parking it in a garage in a German neighborhood. And even some kids went to German school. So you've got all of this going on. And then you have the real reason why the troops are there is not to spend money, but for those troops to provide a functioning military presence to deter any and all comers who would ever step to Germany, where I grew up, or Italy, or France, or Spain, or any of the other ones. So now you've got something called base realignment and closure. You may have heard of it before, you may have not. BRAC is the acronym for it. Base realignment and closure is a process by the United States federal government commission to increase the U.S. Department of Defense efficiency by planning the end of the Cold War realignment and closure of military installations. And so whenever I hear BRAC, I immediately know what it is, and because my mom used to work for BRAC, and my mom was a federal employee. She's retired now. And when she worked for them, I remember sometimes we'd be on the phone. I would be calling her to tell her something cool that one of the kids did. And then I'd say, what are you working on? And she'd tell me what series of bases they were working on closing. Base realignment and closure actually closed more than 350 installations in 5 BRAC rounds in 1988, 1991, 1993, 1995, and 2005. I remember them closing Mannheim because that's where I graduated from high school. That's where I had my, junior prom and senior prom at Heidelberg Castle. And I remember them closing it because a bunch of us who graduated from there over the span of about 5 years, some of them went back there. Now, I don't remember, was I having a baby or I'd had a baby or something? I didn't go. But I remember looking at the pictures and, there was an email stream and it was just this like cathartic moment. And I remember my sister, my mom, and my dad had each been back in Germany for different things, sometimes for work. I think my mom took a trip back there. My mom actually went back there to work for 3 years. And during that time, it was kind of emotional because if you grow up someplace and they close it, and once base realignment and closure shuts a base down, they've extracted everything that they need to, bring back any material or equipment that's owned by the United States that is of any value that they're going to bring back over the water and ship back over to the United States or deploy elsewhere. And then everything else, the buildings, the infrastructure, everything else, it just gets turned back over to the Germans, for example, since we're talking about Germany. And so, there were people who went back to Mannheim American High and took pictures, and they're like, no one's lived here for this many years, and now the base is closed, and the Germans are taking it back over in another week or so. They're going to literally get the keys to the place, and they're going to turn it into whatever. And so we're talking about millions of troops who've passed through these places and lived there with their families, and the kids have grown up there and gone to high school there and graduated, and some of them have remained there. Some kids would actually live there, and some people had their kids there. Some people were stationed in Germany when they had their kids. They started their families there. Some troops married Germans and had these kind of dual continental families. And so when I hear Angela Merkel say we can no longer rely on the United States to protect us, she is so ungrateful when she talks about us like that. When she says we can no longer rely on the United States as if that's some sort of insult to us. How dare she? We poured our blood, sweat, and tears out over there. We had American troops killed in Germany in terrorist attacks. We've had many, many times where we've shown ourselves to be the truest and best of friends to Germany. And for her, with her open borders, pro-migrant, pro-negative policies that she's foisted upon the German people, radically changing the way they live and their entire outlook through her leadership, for her to then, after she's taken all that she can possibly get from the United States over this unratified faux treaty, the Iran deal, the JCPOA, which wasn't even a real thing because nobody of any consequence had signed on to it. Just President Obama and not even the Iranians honored him with their own signature. Then she says, America, we can no longer rely on her for protection. We can no longer rely on America to protect us. They don't deserve our protection. And I say that as someone, I love the German people. But Angela Merkel is probably, in my opinion, she's the worst leader they've ever had, save Hitler. There's Hitler, and then there's Angela Merkel. Those are the two worst leaders they've ever had. And in her speaking about America like that, and that utter disrespect that she's shown for our ability to decide for ourselves as a sovereign nation whether or not we want to be involved in something that isn't even a ratified treaty, it's just ludicrous. And so I'm saying that here on the record, on the air. I don't care how many people get upset with me about it. If you think Angela Merkel rocks, good for you. I'm sorry you're so deceived. But if you just look at our history in Germany and in Western Europe and how much we've given, how we've allowed trade imbalances to exist to benefit them to our own detriment, and we've still made up the difference in our GDP by the hard work and sweat of our brow of the American people, it just has to stop. It's like someone that you've fed for 25 or 30 years, and they're on their own and they're taking care of themselves and they're doing a good job. And then the minute you stop providing free lunches because you're like, wow, you're taking care of yourself, you look like you're standing on your own 2 feet, they then turn around and badmouth you. Any person who had done that would say, wow, this is horrible. I wonder why I'm being badmouthed by this person who I've done so much for. That's Germany right now. And, you know, they have every right to say whatever they want, and we have every right to be insulted by it, and we should be. We don't deserve that kind of comment from Angela Merkel, and we certainly don't have to put up with it from her, which is why President Trump pulled out of the JCPOA, not because of Angela Merkel, but because we didn't want it. Elections have consequences. Somebody's going to get that before this whole thing is over. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure. We'll be back with you for the last show of the week tomorrow. If you're in St. Louis, plan to be at that electoral forum that we're going to have. It's going to be a really nice debate, questions and answers for our Senate candidates, because we're looking for somebody to take on Claire McCaskill. All right. Have a blessed night.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast